As we celebrate our human rights here in South Africa this month, I wanted to chat about something that impacts so many South African women and men: sexual harassment. Sexual harassment infringes on our constitutional right to equality, dignity, physical integrity, and privacy. I remember when I was quite a junior person in the world of work. I joined a new organization and I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and eager to show them what I was made of and that I could make a difference. On my very first business trip with my business partner and his boss, I was sexually harassed. If you're new here, I'm Natasha from Bright Sprout Consulting, and I'm a career and life coach. My goal here on YouTube and in real life is to help individuals feel more confident in the world of work and just in life in general. If you want to build your confidence, then you've come to the right place, because I'll be sharing my top tips for how to build that confidence. So subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you can be updated of any new videos that I post. If you like what you hear, then give this video a thumbs up. Comment, share. It lets the YouTube algorithm know that it's content worth sharing, and it helps grow my channel. We had been on the road maybe for 2 days, and we all went out for dinner that night. It was a fun night. We had lots of conversation, lots of drinks, and I was having a really good time. But it got quite late and we decided to call it a night. It was a good night until my business partner's boss decided to follow me to my room and invite himself in. I was overwhelmed by his forcefulness, and I didn't feel at the time that I could tell him to leave. I mean, he was a senior person. I thought that it would hinder my opportunities to grow within the organization I had just joined. He said that the reason he was there was because he wanted to make himself some coffee, and he would have done it in his own room, but alas, he couldn't find his key. At the time, I knew that his story made no sense, but I felt so helpless that I didn't know how to challenge him. So instead, I excused myself from my own room and I went and I called my fiancé, who is now my husband. Obviously, I freaked him out because it was 2 o'clock in the morning, but I didn't know who else to turn to. So I explained the situation to him. His recommendation to me was to keep the conversation about work and to physically distance myself from the man in my room. So that's what I did. I returned to the room and stood on the furthest part of the room away from him. And I tried to keep the conversation about work. In that moment, I felt afraid. And if anybody knows me, they'll know that I don't feel fear very often. He started the conversation by telling me that he didn't know how I was going to impress him. The way he said it, it felt like a threat. He knew how senior he was and that he potentially had the power to influence the trajectory of my career in this organization. So I felt threatened. It was at this point that I launched into a full conversation about all the initiatives that I planned to implement and the things that I wanted to do in the organization. I also made it clear that I knew that other people who were not in my room at 2 o'clock in the morning would have a bigger influence over where my career goes than him. Essentially, I called his bluff. It took him 40 minutes to finish the coffee that he had made for himself. The most stressful 40 minutes of my life. I was on high alert the entire time. When he was done, he left, looking very dissatisfied with how the conversation had panned out. I was still so afraid that he would return that I locked my door and I put the latch on. You'd think that was it, but the following morning at breakfast, in hushed tones, he let me know that no one needs to know what happened last night. Again, it felt like a threat. But I didn't say anything, and he never propositioned me again. I also made sure that I was never alone in a room with him from that day onwards. Sadly, this is not unique to me. This happens to many people in South Africa daily. Although all organizations probably have a policy that governs how to manage complaints about sexual harassment, I feel that very few people actually know what qualifies as sexual harassment. Because not all sexual harassment is as overt as my instance. Sexual harassment is any unwanted attention of a sexual nature that takes place in the workplace. What you've got to know is that any kind of sexual behavior that makes you feel uncomfortable would qualify as sexual harassment. Examples of this: touching, even if it's a light touch on your arm, if it makes you feel uncomfortable, it could qualify. Jokes about sex, questions related to your sex life, whistling, even how somebody looks at you that makes you feel uncomfortable could qualify. There are two different ways that this could play out. Either, like in my case, the promise of a quid pro quo, where some part of your employment is contingent on you offering some form of sexual favor. The second way is the creation of a hostile working environment where the unwanted behavior interferes or disrupts your work in some way. Now that you know what it is, you're probably wondering what you can do to protect yourself against harassment. The easy answer would be to say, report any instance of where you feel uncomfortable to someone in authority, which is easier said than done. When I think back to my experience, I now, in hindsight, realize why I didn't report this man. Fundamentally, I thought that people wouldn't believe me, that they would believe his version of events, and it would in some way impact my employment with that company. What helped me though in this instance was that I was able to speak to someone I trust about this instance, and not for the purposes of reporting the person, but just to share my experience so that I know that there's someone on my side. So that's my first tip. If you are experiencing any form of harassment and it's making you uncomfortable, find a trusted person to tell, so that you can also have the feeling that you're not alone in this, that there are people there that are willing to support you through this. My second tip for where there is repeated offenses is that you start keeping a documented journal of all the things that are making you uncomfortable, and be as detailed as possible. Dates, times, what was said. If you choose to at some point report the person, this will help you. It will help you show that there's a pattern of harassment. My final tip is to know your rights. Go and read up on your company's policy around how to manage sexual harassment, so that if the person does something that makes you uncomfortable, you have the backing of the policy when you tell them, please stop doing this, I don't feel comfortable with it. And if you experience any form of unfair discrimination, you can then, with confidence, go to your HR team and report the fact that he is harassing you, he or she is harassing you, using the policy as your backing. I know today's video has been quite a heavy one. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If any of you have experienced any form of harassment in the workplace and you found different ways to deal with it, please feel free to pop your tips into the comment section below so that you can share those thoughts with the rest of the community. Join me next week. I'll be joined by my small humans and we'll be chatting about what human rights mean to them. As mentioned earlier, I am a career and life coach. If you want to build your confidence and you're just looking for someone to walk that path with you, then please feel free to reach out. All of my details will be in the description box below.